Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show, bringing you another fascinating guest on this episode who's helping to create a better tomorrow on many different fronts. Today we have the honor of being joined by Katie Baca-Motes, who is Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Scripps Research Translational Institute and co-founder of the Scripps Research Digital Trial Center. Katie leads various initiatives at the organization, including launching their Digital Trial Center, focusing on expanding their institute's portfolio of decentralized clinical trial initiatives, including the DETECT program, which is involved in COVID-19 research, PowerMom, a fascinating maternal health research program, and Progress, which is one of their upcoming type 2 diabetes persistent nutrition programs. And she also helps oversee the Institute's role in the National Institutes of Health All of Us research program and the Scripps membership as a participant center. Scripps Research Translational Institute, founded back in 2007, ultimately with this aim of individualizing healthcare, leveraging the remarkable progress that's been made in areas like human genomics, combining it with the power of wireless digital technologies. Scripps Research Digital Trial Center, which is part of SRTI, leads their groundbreaking studies that address the world's most pressing health concerns by pioneering siteless clinical trials and leveraging this rapidly evolving digital health landscape to ultimately really re-engineer the clinical trial experience around the participant rather than just a research site. Katie's past experience includes managing various behavioral research projects with SRTI. She also Walt Disney, Aetna, Janssen, other organizations, and her research projects over the years have leveraged insights from behavioral economics, other social sciences, in areas like improving clinical trial enrollment, increasing return on incentive schemes, understanding psychology behind consumer decisions, as well as a variety of other really cool areas. Katie has her bachelor's in biology and chemistry, University of New Mexico, her MBA from University of California, San Diego, and we are really honored and lucky to have her with us today. So, Katie Baca-Motes, thank you so much for taking the time to come on our show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
Yeah, this is a really exciting area of themes. I'd like to start off by handing you the floor for a little bit to talk a little bit about the early journey. If you could just further introduce yourself a little bit, and also, I'd love to hear about a little of that early journey from behavioral economics and consumer behavior studies at Disney. We're a big Disney fan in our family. Ultimately, to decentralized clinical trials and a little bit of that early path.
Perfect. Yeah, it is a weird transition, and we're big Disney fans too. I just actually surprised the kids with Disneyland tickets for spring break, and they wake up every morning saying, how many days until we go to Disneyland? So yes, a bit of a weird transition. I will say I've always been really interested in human behavior, always, as long as I can remember. I've just been fascinated just to see, how people respond to sales, how people respond to messaging, and why people do what they do. But I didn't really know, if there was a science behind it until I landed at University of California at San Diego, the Rady School of Management. So when I went to get my MBA, it was right when this sort of nudge theory and behavioral econ was, sort of exciting at that time. Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein had just published Nudge. Dan Ariely had just published Predictably Irrational. And I started reading these books like crazy. I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And while I was reading these books, I started recognizing names I knew. And I was like, I think that guy's my professor. I think that woman's my professor. And it turns out that there was a really great group of behavioral economists over at the Rady School. And I just, tried every way to get my way in there. And I was lucky enough to have, some of my professors as academic collaborators in my first job outside of MBA. So I went, I think it was like my last quarter of business school that I started working at Disney Research. And it's a small group within the Imagineering department. So I get to tell my kids I was an Imagineer too, which seems very cool to them. And, we just started looking at, can we run randomized controlled trials, both in the hotels and the resorts, to start to understand why guests were acting the way they did. And in some cases, we were trying to influence guest behavior to do things like, behave more with more green behavior in hotels, like hang up your towels and shut off your lights and use less electricity, that sort of thing. So that was my first sort of entry point into research. And I hadn't really gone the academic path. I didn't have any real desire to go down the academic path, but I thought it was fascinating. And I think it was supposed to start at Disney. It was supposed to be an internship that was supposed to last for about 3 months. I ended up being there for 3 years and then continued to work with some of my academic partners on consulting opportunities and things where we would go into companies and start to look at, okay, how can we start to test things within your organization? How can we start to look at incentive structure? How can we start to increase return on what you guys are offering your customers? So was really involved in that for several years. And as a part of some of those collaborations and partnerships, I actually was introduced to Scripps Research. So Dr. Eric Topol, who runs our group, and then Dr. Steve Steinhubel, who also, he and his wife Monica were big Disney fans. So I lucked out because Steve loved Disney, he loved behavioral econ, and he was a mastermind in digital health at the time. So my first journey into clinical research and digital health, which I'm in now, and I have been for the last 6 years, was Eric and Steve were running one of the very first siteless decentralized clinical trials. And they were doing this in partnership with Janssen Pharmaceuticals, as a part of J&J and Aetna. And what they were trying to do is figure out, can we engage a high-risk population? So in this case, high risk for stroke. And the average age of the participants that we were seeking was about 75 years old. So, so to do a digital clinical siteless trial and then doing it for the first time on an average age of 75, it was a bit kind of everyone's like, can we actually do this? And the reason I got involved is they had everything end to end, they were able to mail out the, in this case, an AFib patch that was detecting AFib, so a Zeo patch. They were able to do online consent, which at the time was a new thing. And they had basically the entire study design already set up, but they started sending out emails and letters to try and recruit out of the high-risk Aetna population, and it was terrible. Nobody responded. And that's when I got the call. Steve called me up and he's like, hey, Katie, do you think like behavioral science can help with some of this recruitment, challenges that we're having? And I was like, I'm coming from like Disney and, other Silicon Valley companies. I was like, I don't know how to recruit 75-year-olds into a clinical trial. But I did say, if you're using email and, the open rates are terrible, we could just A/B test some subject lines, right? We can A/B test what the email body copy looks like. And so they were intrigued at that. I, at the time, didn't know that was considered innovative in the clinical trial space. I just assumed it was standard like it is everywhere else. But it turns out that was something that we had to, innovate and convince an institutional review board, the IRB, which oversees clinical trials, to allow us to do. And I'll talk more about that because we've been, working on that process to streamline that for the last 6 years. But in this case, we were able to go in, we did a little bit of testing. We had some interesting insights as to, what people were responding to. And it was interesting because, in a high-risk population for stroke is a terrible thing, right? And so if you find out you're high risk for stroke and there's something you can do about it, that's pretty compelling. There were also things, like altruistic. Everybody thinks like it's all altruism, why people will enroll in clinical trials. Well, it turns out those messaging didn't work as well on this population as, hey, we want you to test out a new technology. And that seemed to be the message that resonated with people, which nobody thought it would do. First of all, it's not like we're sending you out an Apple Watch. We're sending you out an ugly, sensor that basically looks like a big medical Band-Aid. So, but that is the thing that got people really excited. So that was surprising. So it was my entry into the field with the NSTOPS program.
Awesome. And yeah, I mean, I want to sort of reread that part of your mission statement again that I mentioned at the beginning, re-engineering the clinical trial experience around the participant. And, it's so fascinating because, we've had, as I mentioned before this show, we've had sort of pieces, let's say, of this story on our show in the sense that we've talked to people, let's say the NIH All of Us program, we have a tremendous amount of data, whether that's genomics or proteomics or what have you. And then on the other hand, we have, these other themes, aging in place, the smart home, recently the hospital in the home. You're bringing it all together for this really fascinating theme. We'll broadly discuss digital clinical trials. Talk about what a digital clinical trial is and why 2022, all the factors are really coming together to make this possible.
Yeah, it's a really interesting time, like you said, where all of these elements are starting to come together. They were already coming together, and then I think COVID just really accelerated that. So going back to what does it mean to design something around the participant rather than the research site is something new. So for the All of Us research program, it was announced as a part of the broader precision medicine initiative. It was announced at the 2015 State of the Union, and part of that was part of the mission, and it was boldly stated at the beginning, is we want to allow anyone, anywhere to raise their hand and be a part of this program. And that is great in theory. How do you actually make that happen? From, rural Alaska to Guam to, Nebraska to, every urban center, because clinical research has really been done around academic medical centers. And you go into the clinic and you have a study coordinator who sits out in the lobby and says, you might be eligible for this, and walks you through a paper consent form. This is how it's still done. I was actually talking to some folks over across the street at Scripps Health the other day in oncology, and I was asking them their process, and it's exactly the same as that. Well, we have this one study coordinator who goes through, the EHR, and then calls them up and then meets with them in person. But that's not the way digital clinical trials work, and that's not the way you can get to anyone, anywhere. You have to innovate. And so part of our task for the Participant Center Award that again was awarded to our group about 6 years ago in 2016. We were tasked with multiple things. One of the things is bringing digital health technologies into the program and a couple other things, but the big thing was the direct volunteer, is what it was called at the time, program, where we would enroll everybody who wasn't being enrolled in an academic medical center, like a health provider organization or a community partner. So all the stuff that wasn't done sort of through a traditional study coordinator. And that meant we had to do things, we had to figure out how to reach people, in some cases digitally, in some cases on the ground with like an exhibit coming through town, in some cases, via phone, email, direct mail pieces. We had to innovate on all these things. And then we had to figure out, how do we complete the entire protocol? It's one thing to take somebody and get them online and go through the e-consent, but how do we start to innovate and make the biosample collection viable for everybody? Well, we would partner with places like Quest Labs, Walgreens. There were some places that would do in-home blood draws. Now, in some of our programs, not the All of Us research program quite yet, but some of our other programs, we're looking at in-home self-blood draws. So I'll talk about that when we talk about the progress study.
Sure.
But these are all things that had to happen, as well as how do we get electronic health records on these folks? And so we worked early with the Sync for Science team, who started the Smart on Fire API, patient-mediated access, which you might be familiar with from Apple Health Records. It's the same thing. You log into your patient portal, you can access your health records via Smart on Fire. And then some of that data is visualized back to you via smartphone. So we were able to work with several organizations across the country to do each of those steps. How do we complete this? You know, and it's not that complex, but it's a pretty complex protocol to be done in the home or in places that are of a reasonable driving distance to anywhere in the country. So that was our task for the All of Us research program. And then once we started doing that, and once we built that infrastructure to enable anyone, anywhere, we really realized, wow, you can build research around the participant. You don't need to build it around the research site. That seems backwards to us. If we want anybody anywhere to both contribute to and benefit from clinical research, we really need to make it convenient for folks. Mm-hmm. We need to make it easy. We need to make it exciting. And it's not that there's not face-to-face interaction. It's really about making it so easy and compelling and value added back to the individual that they can go and they can recruit their neighbors, their grandma, their children, and everybody can start to interact with research in a different way. And that's sort of where my Disney hat comes back in. It's, you know, how long do you get from when your first touch point all the way here? Have you given any moments of delight before, you know, because it's all data suck. It's like, we've got somebody, so let's ask them 100 questions and let's have them do this. Right. And it's like, you know, I just saw a Facebook ad and now I'm online. I don't have like an hour to sit down with you. Right. So how do we make that journey, completely reimagine the journey so that, you know, if somebody's in their patient portal, you might give them a front door there to donate their electronic health records. If somebody's sitting at a blood bank and there's already, we have an interesting thing, a partnership with the blood banks where they take extra blood to test the blood as a part of their blood donation process. Well, you can also donate that blood. Well, there's nothing easier than saying, do you want to donate your blood that's already sitting about to go in the trash can versus, you know, picking up the phone and saying, do you want to donate blood? Do you want to make an appointment? Do you want to come down? Do you want to park? Do you want to go in? Do you want to not pass out while you get your blood drawn? Like, make it as easy as possible for people to be a part of that process. And then always remember, you got to give something back at every step of the way. And I think that's where some of this stuff is lost with digital, because we forget all the nuanced back and forth that happens with the in-person interaction, whether it's the smile or the gratitude or the, you know, just friendly interaction. You've got to bring some of that into the digital space so it's not cold. They're still getting that constant feedback. So yeah, that's really what we mean about designing around the participant. And I'll tell you sort of our first proof of concept, if you'll allow me just to keep, keep chatting, but it was looking, so you had mentioned in the intro, our DETECT program. Yep. So DETECT was one of our first, you know, sort of entry points into, can we take this partnerships that we've been building at Scripps for a very long time, our knowledge around digital health technology, and then now this new infrastructure that can quickly enable tens of thousands of people to enroll in research programs. Can we use that at the start of the pandemic? So I'll sort of give you the backstory of that. In January of 2022, so, you know, we knew the pandemic, we knew COVID, but it was very, very early. January 2020. Our group had just published 2 papers. So one was from Dr. Jennifer Radin, who had, through a partnership that we had with Fitbit, took a look at, you know, hundreds of thousands of de-identified Fitbit data and looked at, could you correlate increases in resting heart rate with the CDC data? So turns out you can sort of predict flu outbreaks just by looking at people's resting heart rate and changes in that. The other one that came out at the same time was from Dr. Giorgio Quer, looking at that very thing, like, why does that happen? Why can you do that? It's because, you know, resting heart rate can range on a population level, you know, 50 beats per minute, 70 beats per minute, 90 beats per minute. It's all considered normal range. But for you as an individual, your resting heart rate is actually pretty, you know, unique to you. Mm-hmm. So for me, my resting heart rate is usually around 68 beats per minute. And for me, it won't vary, and it won't for most people vary outside of 3 beats per minute unless something's going on. And one of those things that's happening could be that you're coming down with a viral illness. So if we take a look at that at a population level and we see hotspots, we might see New York, you might see some interesting trends where you're seeing at a population level, more and more people are going out of that, standard range for them. It might indicate that there's an outbreak. So all of that said was, 2 publications came out in January. A couple of our partners were calling us at the beginning of the pandemic saying, maybe that could be useful for us with this new COVID thing that's happening right now. So we were like, yeah, it could. So let's recruit a bunch of people who already own a Fitbit, an Apple Watch, a Garmin, a Withings. Let's see if we can connect the digital health sensors, and then we'll set up sort of a lightweight, a light touch digital research program where people can put in any symptoms they might be feeling, any test results they had, and then later when they got their vaccines and other things. So we went, I think the folks on our team went from concept to nationwide launch in about 4 weeks.
Wow.
So it was pretty crazy. I won't say 4 weeks of a normal work week. It was 4 weeks of a lot of work, but we got it through the IRB. We launched everything. We partnered. Nice thing about Scripps is we've got great partners. I mean, everybody came together. It was Fitbit, Walgreens, CVS, Withings, Garmin. They all did outreach, on behalf of the DETECT study, and they were all collaborators in that. And then our technical platform, Care Evolution, also, was integral in designing the study and using their backend technology. So all of these folks came together. We launched, and then we quickly enrolled. I think in the first 3 months, we enrolled about 35,000 people into the study. And then it led to some of the first algorithm development work using wearable device data to predict COVID. And we've had about 5 pretty high impact publications that have come from since then. So not only you can use it to predict COVID. At first we started, can it add to when people put in symptoms? Can you do better with the wearable device data in predicting who has COVID and who isn't? Now the algorithm development has progressed such that, and again, my behavioral science hat loves this, you don't even need people to put in symptoms. So it can really serve as a passive, data capture, and you can start to alert people, hey, you're out of baseline, you might be getting sick, you might want to go get tested. And then the other thing that the groups are looking at is the physiological changes that happen with COVID that are unique to COVID. So, we're seeing baseline resting heart rates not decreasing at the same rates as they do for flu and colds. And so really understanding the onset of the disease, the progression of the disease, starting to dive into the long COVID space and understanding why some people, have prolonged physiological changes that are coming in. So lots of interesting research that has, come out of that DETECT program, but it was really our first sort of proof of concept. Man, can we really just go out there and blow the doors open and allow people, citizen scientists, to, enroll in the program? And, and then we did some work to make sure, the other thing that we want to make sure is it's not just limited to people who own their own devices and can afford to buy a Fitbit or an Apple Watch. We did some device distribution and some really focused efforts in places that, maybe otherwise wouldn't have known about the DETECT program, up in Alaska, in Guam, in other places of the country, rural Mississippi. So we went in with some strong partners that could help us get to places that, a Fitbit app or a Walgreens app wasn't going to necessarily reach. So it's been an interesting progression to see what's happening, and there's still work being done on the DETECT program. And now, for a while, in the beginning, it was just like, oh, now we can identify hotspots. But obviously, the entire world has basically been a hotspot for the last few years. So we're hoping now this next phase, it will actually really serve as, the ability to start to detect things early, and as new flares and new outbreaks happen, it might serve well for that purpose. It's about on par with the wastewater surveillance, is what the new research coming out from Dr. Raiden and others on the team is showing. So
very, very cool, very elegant too. And I see, how it serves as a beautiful proof of concept, and then, as you were saying, it has all these other modifications and potential beyond what it was initially designed for. So that's really exciting. Let's go next, because you mentioned a little bit about sort of the home blood draw topic, and we did a show a little while ago on a startup that was working on that type of technology. But here, you have a program you're developing called Progress. It's focused on type 2 diabetes, and here we have obviously an area that one would say is a tremendous unmet medical need, but is more than that, right? It is a medical issue, it's a nutrition issue, it's a lifestyle issue, a lot going on in terms of across the body, the physiology of this disease. Talk about what you have going on here, and then also if you could weave back in whatever, if it's not confidential, what you're doing in terms of home blood draw as a part of that. I think that'd be pretty cool to learn about.
Sure. Yeah. No. None of this is confidential, so I can share it all. So cool. We are working on a precision nutrition study called Progress. It will look at half of the population that we're going to be recruiting in the initial study, and we're recruiting 1,000 people in the initial study. Half will be healthy participants, half will be type 2 diabetics. And this one's really exciting. It's led by Dr. Ed Ramos on our team as the principal investigator. But what I love about it is really showing now what you can truly do in the home. It's like, yeah, you can recruit people, you can do all of those things. But like I talked about, getting a very robust protocol, direct to patient in the home, never actually needing any interaction from study coordinators that you can't do on the phone. This one's pretty incredible. So it is in the precision nutrition space, but what they're looking at is, can we start to predict glycemic response to different foods based on your microbiome, based on your genetics, based on multiple factors that we're analyzing. But it's pretty complex. So you go in, you do basically the online recruiting and enrollment that we typically do. You can link your electronic health records by the patient mediated Smart on Fire that I discussed before. And then you get 3 basically kits sent to the same time. So we start with Biokits. And one of those things is the home blood draw. So you spit in a saliva tube. That's easy. Everybody can do that now with 23andMe and everything. That's pretty standard, not scary at all. So we do saliva, and then you do the at-home blood draw. So we use the touch-activated phlebotomy devices. In this case, we've tested all of them. I had them all over my office at some point in time where we were drawing our own blood, and my kids were watching me and blood was splurting out. But it was funny because I think, 4 years ago, Dr. Eric Topol came down to my office with one of these devices. It was one of the early phases. He's like, yeah, you can just draw your own blood, just slap it on your arm and it's easy peasy. And I was like, Eric, I'm not going to do that. Like, that's crazy. But he finally convinced me to do it. And it turns out, like, even those early versions were pretty easy to use. I told everybody in the office, I was like, it kind of feels like one of those like slapstick bracelets that your kids, use, you put on your arm. It's like a little sting, but nothing big. But the problem was the early phases, you couldn't get much blood out. And that's still the problem, is we're trying to get more and more, in terms of blood amount out of the stuff. And some of it's capillary blood, and some of it, you can only do so much. But in this case, we just need HbA1c levels. And so the top device worked really well. We used Tasso is what we ended up, after we tested everything, depending on what, it met all of our needs. But there are many out there. That's the one that we chose. And we've got a couple of blogs on it if people are interested in what all we tested and what the teams did. Several people worked on that. But yeah, this is one of the first that I've seen. I mean, and I know other people have done it, but one of the first times that our group has actually sent out a blood draw at-home device, had people use it, seems to be working quite well. And then they pop it back in the mail and they send it off to the lab. The other thing that we're doing is the microbiome collection, and those are advancing as well. So we're working with a couple of partners from, microbiome collection is not a fun thing to talk about, but we talk about
that's okay.
All the time. So we talk about like, oh, what was your experience? This is tiny shovel that we're using. But these the newer versions are going to be much better that we're looking at and we're partnering with, which is basically a wipe, and then you put it in liquid, it dissolves, and we're able to do a lot of stuff. So lots of innovation coming in that area as well. So people do all of that in the progress study. Once they're done with that, they send back all their kits, and then they're eligible for their Fitbit device that we send them, and Dexcom sensor. So they're actually stepping on their own CGM at home. They get a Fitbit to wear, and then there's a 10-day pretty intense tracking period where you're tracking, your Fitbit's tracking your activity and your sleep and all of that, but you're tracking your nutrition intake, but also getting data visualization back to see how your nutrition intake is affecting your glucose spikes. So it's a really cleverly designed, I think, participant journey. When I went with it, I was like, because I did the incentive design early, I was like, okay, we've got to have these points, and then you have thresholds, and it's where you get back your gift cards, and nobody's going to want to do the diet tracking. I've done that with other diet when I've tried to lose weight. Nobody's going to do that. But I was surprised when I went through the dry run. It's fascinating to be able to, like, oh, I ate a banana, like what happens to my blood sugar? So giving people back information all the way through a research program, and not being paternalistic and saying, oh, we can't show them the data because it might affect this and that. And sometimes it does, but so you have to be careful with your study design. But our general stance is always give information back as quickly as we possibly can, ideally at the same time that we're getting it, right? That's why people want to connect their electronic health records, because when they get it, they get their electronic health records visualized in the research app. They want to connect their Fitbit data and things like that. One is because it's valuable. The other thing I really like about it is because it's transparent, right? Because, all the old ways of, you get a HIPAA waiver, people might get your electronic health records. You have no idea what's in your electronic health records. You have no access. You don't know exactly what you shared with the research partner. We try and make sure that data visualization and data access is there, because it could be valuable and empowering for you, but it could also be, it's transparent. You know exactly what we have because you have it too. You're looking at the same thing that we're looking at. So it's exciting to see the progression in what can we do outside of the clinic, outside of the home. That way, anybody, anywhere can really truly be a part of these studies. So that'll be exciting. We're still early stages of enrolling for that program. There's a wait list because there's lots of excitement in being able to get this information back on yourselves. There's a lot of commercially available stuff, but they're expensive. And this one, you get to do for free and actually get some incentives to actually be a part of it. So that one's exciting, and we're hoping to wrap enrollment for that study over the next 6 months, maybe.
Awesome. And we don't shy away from discussing the microbiome on this show at all. So we did an episode of it with the smart toilet technology. So it'd be interesting to see how that ultimately feeds into what you do at some point in the future.
So those are fascinating too. Yeah. I'm like, wow. There is so much stuff is coming on board with the sensors and stuff. I actually miss being in the office a little bit because we'd always have these like random, new technologies and sensors and things sent to the office, and we, get to play around with them. But we'll get back to the office eventually.
Okay, let's talk a little bit now, if you would, about PowerMom, because this is another example of, once again, turning what originally considers as subjects into partners, and here you're working with the healthy pregnancy research community, and this is another, it's one of those things you don't really think about, but pregnancy, gestation, and so forth, dangerous times. And although, we talk about Alzheimer's and cancer and heart disease and so forth, a lot going on here. Obviously, we have the neonate to think about, as well as the mother, stress, gestational diabetes, microbiome, all sorts of other things happening in this ecosystem. Talk a little bit about what's going on with PowerMom and this program, if you would.
Yeah, PowerMom is our passion project this year. I would say it's our priority. It's maternal mortality and morbidity in this country it's embarrassing. It's sad. It's, we rank the worst amongst all developed countries in our outcomes overall. And then if you look at, women of color, it's even worse. I mean, the rates are just horrific. And so we wanted to, this project has been a little bit longer in the making. And so we had a successful pilot project with PowerMom going on several years ago, about 5 years ago or so. That was, again, our sort of proof of concept into this phase. So we partnered in the pilot project with WebMD and Sage Bio Networks and a couple other partners, just looking at if we put together a completely digital study, asking people to share, survey data, some wearable device data, outcomes data, would people even enroll? So it was earlier. I mean, there's been so much advances over the last couple of years. So this, it's hard to think back to 2016, 2017. None of this was really, commonplace like it is now, but we were able to do that. So our proof of concept showed that if we were to partner with WebMD and we had the research app embedded into their pregnancy app, would pregnant people feel comfortable sharing these data throughout the course of their pregnancy? Turns out is yes. I mean, I don't think we spent any money. We got maybe 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 women enrolled in every single state of the country. We were really excited about the number of participants coming in from rural areas. So we're not just looking at the urban areas. We had rural populations. The diversity was pretty good, considering we weren't even, there wasn't a real attempt to do anything other than a broad-based outreach. So with that program, we were really excited to see what sorts of information will women start to provide in an observational study. We did some analyses from that. We looked at medication use. We looked at weight gain. We looked at, several early stage stuff. We did that. We're like, this is fantastic. We need to scale this in a big way. And that's what we want to do this year. And so again, coming back to the theme of the Scripps Research Digital Trial Center and Scripps Research as a whole, the partnerships, right? We're a small group, we're a small academic research center, but we have these amazing partners that always come and, anytime we want to have something big and huge, like we did at the beginning of the pandemic, like we did with the All of Us research program. And now there's several organizations who have joined the PowerMom consortium to really shine a light on the lack of maternal health research. There's a lot of things that impact, our maternal mortality rates in this country. But one of the things is research. There's a lack of research that's done on pregnant people, and it has been for a long time. So we announced the PowerMom consortium with partners. WebMD came back. We also have Blue Cross Blue Shield Association, March of Dimes, Microsoft, Walgreens, Philips, May Health, African American Wellness Center for Children and Families, Happy Baby, Healthy Mama. Some of these are smaller community partners that really help us reach target populations that, we want to enroll in the study. So several organizations have come together to join the PowerMom consortium, which again, we hope turns into thought leaders and really understanding how to advance maternal health research as a whole. And then the cornerstone of that PowerMom consortium is the PowerMom baseline research platform. So the way we've conducted that and several of our other digital trial center is how can we make this lightweight, passive, observational study that people want to enroll in that can lead to deeper dive sub-studies. So we enroll women anytime, pregnant people anytime over the course of their pregnancy or postpartum. They come in, fill out some basic demographic information, bi-weekly surveys. They can connect wearable device data if they have their own wearable, a smartwatch, Fitbit, Apple Watch, whatever, or any connected device that connects into Apple Health Kit or Google Fit. We also distribute Fitbit devices to eligible people coming into the program, and balance scales, the ARIA scales from Fitbit, through a nice generous donation from them. So it's pretty lightweight. So we have that passive data gathering. We have the biweekly surveys and other lightweight surveys and outcome surveys. And then there is the option for people to connect and view their electronic health records. So that's our baseline study. Then we will have deeper dive sub-studies that build upon this. So we're really hoping the research platform itself will enable several sub-studies. So we're doing this now in Detect, which I talked about before, but we have deep dive sub-studies on 500 people are doing this, and 30 people are doing acoustic signaling, and we're recruiting out of the baseline study to do a deeper dive. this will be the same thing with PowerMom, is how can we create this research community and continually enroll pregnant people throughout the course of their pregnancy to give rise to some of these sub-studies. So Dr. Alicia Ajay, who runs that program, already has 2 sub-studies that she's running off of it. One is looking at systemic racism and the impact of experiencing perceived racism during the course of your pregnancy on outcomes. The other is looking at postpartum mental health with one of our partners, Wobot. We will do a sub-study with them looking at their FDA-approved postpartum mental health tool and give people the opportunity to do that. And we'll do a randomized control trial during the postpartum period. So we're excited about that. So a couple of things is just, there's such a lack of knowledge. And so when I talk to, other parents who have gone through this, I mean, the one theme that just keeps coming up again and again is, I have all these questions and there's no answers. I mean, you look for research, you look for answers. My baby sister is 12 years younger than me and going through her first. She's going to give birth next week. So I'm super excited about that. But she has the same questions that I had 12 years ago. We have the same questions, probably more questions than we had, that my mother had when she had all 4 of us. Now in the United States, as an American expectant mother, you're 50 times more likely to die in childbirth than your mom was. I mean, that's horrible, right? It's terrible. And I mean, it's questions on, like I remember my sister was first pregnant. It's stupid questions. Like, can I really not eat sushi? Like, what do other women in other parts of the world do? Like, can I not eat that turkey sandwich? To really hard questions. Like, I had a friend who has a chronic, disease, and should I continue treatment or should I not continue treatment? What's the better outcome for my child? And we're talking with Big Pharma about this medication adherence a lot, because everybody's excluded automatically from research because we're considered a vulnerable population. And so there's no answers out there.
Right.
So how do we start to do this? So one thing is observational, just seeing what medications are people on in general. Like, people will tell you. I mean, we found out in the pilot program, people are pretty honest about what they're taking, over the counter, prescription, everything. And then how do we start to work with pharma, with policy, with payers to start to introduce pregnant women back into research? I mean, most recently, the COVID vaccine. Pregnant women were excluded from the COVID vaccine trials, which is great. We're protecting women and we're protecting babies. Nobody wants them in a trial. But then the vaccines are there and there's no answers.
Yep.
Do you take the vaccine? Do you not take the vaccine? And so Dr. Ajay, that I mentioned, who's the principal investigator of the program, she was very vocal about her decision at, I think she was 32 weeks pregnant, taking the vaccine, really sharing that experience online. And there was such an outpouring of support and gratitude for sharing that story and understanding, because everybody's left to their own. It is this interesting, dynamic of, well, we want to protect you, but then we're not going to give you any answers because there's no research done. So that the PowerMom program is really meant to introduce and accelerate maternal health research again in a big way. And we're doing so with a lot of organizations, a lot of companies who are mission aligned, who are, horrified at the rates of maternal mortality, and especially the racial and ethnic disparities that are visible there and across many of our health conditions. But that just launched, and so we're very excited about that. We are opening up our arms to more and more partners who want to get involved, who want to do outreach to people of childbearing age, or people who want to be partners in the research, or people who want to help on the policy side, who want to start to understand that. So that, I think, is going to be really big for us over the next 2 to 5 years. But it just launched, the consortium launched in December, and we have a soft launch of the program going on right now.
Excellent. Katie, I just want to take a step back from the digital trials for a moment, just to broadly the Scripps Research. One of the things I mentioned in the intro, and you brought up all of us as you were mentioning some of the projects, is your role at Scripps as a participant center. And we profiled a little bit about this. We had I had Chris Lunt on a show last year, generally talking about technology per the program, and then Rachel Romani at the Veterans Administration on their piece of that in terms of the Million Veterans Program. How are things? I mean, can you just talk a little bit about sort of what goes on as a participant center per the All of Us program at Scripps, sort of how things are in 2022? You got, I know we just came out of the pandemic, but how's just the whole dynamic of that working?
Yeah, no. So we've been a part of the program. So at Scripps, we got the Participant Center grant back in 2016. So we've been involved since the launch of the program.
Right.
It's actually, you know, when I came on full time at Scripps, so part of the MSTOP study early on, I was just consulting as part of their study, and when that ramped down, I joined full time to help with the All of Us Research Program Participant Center. It's been fantastic. I've recently, you know, stepped away from that role to help start our Digital Trials Center. Julia Moore-Vogel has taken over as director of that program, but I'm still involved in the sense of all of our partnerships and supporting the Participant Center. No, Chris and, you know, Rachel Wild, but the Participant Center, again, really there was two bigger things. There's lots of little things, but two big things was digital health technology integration. So how can we start to innovate on bringing wearable technology in as a part of this multimodal data that will be a part of the All of Us research program? And then the other was enrolling everybody who didn't have access to an academic medical center or a community center where they were doing in-person enrollment. So we, again, have several partners. I think there's like 27 partners that work with us under our grant. I might have those numbers wrong, but really helping us spread the word about the All of Us research program, about its mission. Very exciting today, actually, the researcher workbench that is available to researchers just launched, you know, access to genomic sequencing for the very first time. So that's hot off the press this morning. I'm sure Chris Lontwood is, you know, very excited about that. He's been integral in that effort. And the nice thing about the All of Us research program, we talk about health disparities and we talk about the lack of research being done on non-white individuals. Over 50% of the participants in the All of Us research program come from a non-white background. And also, I think it's close to 80% come from other categories that have been traditionally underrepresented in biomedical research. And so that can be lower socioeconomic or educational status, rural population, sexual gender minorities. So there's been a real concerted effort to make sure that, again, this program and the research being done is really making sure it's being done for everybody and representative of the entire country. So the Participant Center, we've done a lot of the innovation work. So they typically call us the innovation arm of the program. So we bring in a lot of the stuff that we've done over the years to figure out, again, how do we reach people anywhere? How do we bring in, you know, the widespread, you know, capabilities for biosample? How do we start to bring in the wearable device data? How do we start to innovate on other aspects of the program? I was excited. I think our team has really done a lot of innovation work around the communication process as well, and even outreach and recruitment, bringing in, you know, going back to the early story of the MSTOP study of A/B testing things. You know, how do we do these things, and how do you work that through a big, you know, IRB process and make sure, you know, everything goes through all the regulatory stuff. It was a challenge, a fun challenge, but we made a lot of progress with the innovation on the All of Us research program, and that's still going strong. People are very excited. The mobile exhibit is now touring the country again, so that's live now from COVID. Places are opening up for face-to-face work, and you know, like I said, the researcher workbench is continuing to open up and add new layers. So it's good. I think we're almost halfway there. I think we've got about 480,000 participants across the country who have enrolled in the All of Us research program, and plans to accelerate that now that you know, maybe we're getting a little bit of a lull in COVID, but there's ongoing research and ongoing enrollment for that.
Awesome. Okay, one other question, and you know, throughout the discussion, you've mentioned many of your partners, and you have obviously the major names on there. You have the Microsofts, the United Healthcare, and the healthcare organizations. You have the pharmacies, the Walgreens. I didn't see any big pharma names on there, and it could be because of the confidential. But are we, or when will we be at the point yet? What is 2022, 2025, whatever, where I could be Pfizer, Merck, J&J, whomever that comes to Katie Baca-Motes, and I have drug X for phase 1 clinical trial, hand it over to you. I want to do a complete digital clinical development of a drug. Are we anywhere near that? Or is that something that, hey, maybe we are near that soon? Can you say a few words?
I think we are. So it's interesting. You're right. We didn't partner with any big pharma for the All of Us research program or anything. We are partnering with Janssen now on a detect sub-study. So that one's pretty interesting. So we're working with a respiratory illness group and trying to figure out how do we do earlier detection of respiratory illness using wearable device data plus other things in the home. Maybe it's just symptom capture or whatever, and looking at that onset of the disease and the progression, doing a little bit with acoustic signaling and capturing cough and acoustic signaling in the home. Can you send out an at-home test? Now we're all comfortable with at-home tests, so it's great, right? Yeah. At-home diagnostics are really going to open up, a lot of space. So we're running a sub-study with Janssen Pharmaceuticals right now called Detect Ahead. Cool. It recruits out of the Detect general population, and then people get stuff sent to their home. They get, some sensors and, fancier wearable device data or wearable devices, and then at-home testing that tests for COVID and RSV. So we've got some stuff going on there, but I do think that we're getting very, very close to pharma being able to step away from their traditional clinical trials as well. I mean, there's some stuff that's always going to have to be done with a clinician in home, but there's a lot of things now, like we've talked about today, that can step outside of that. And so I think there's more and more of an appetite for understanding, and leveraging the things that can be done direct to patient. It's much cheaper, it's much quicker, it's much more convenient for a participant. You can increase the diversity quite a bit when you do it that way. I think for the sub-study that we're running with Janssen, we enrolled 450 people over the course of 9 weeks. 50% come from traditionally underrepresented groups, so 30% racial and ethnic, minorities. So not only can we do it quick, everything's, diverse participant set. And so I think that there's now several, proof points that we can point to for the success of that. And like I said, it's much faster, much cheaper, which everybody wants, because we want to accelerate this drug development. But we're a little bit, far away from, being able to do, some of this, take it through FDA approval, completely in our shop. We do that with other partners. Digital therapeutics is going to be interesting. The sub-study that we have going on with PowerMom is going to be interesting, with the Wobot, digital tool looking at postpartum mental health. So that is an area that we're getting into. We're excited about it. I think we're in the early stages, so it's a great time to get into that.
Yeah, it's remarkable, everything you've been doing, and as once again, coming back to this mission about building these experiences around patients, it's just, it's such the right spot, the way everything's converging together. And I really wish you the best, and your team, with all of this and what you're doing. For everybody that is going to be listening to this particular episode, on the podcast or watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Katie Baca-Motes, Senior Director, Strategic Initiatives, Scripps Research Translational Institute, co-founder of the Scripps Research Digital Trials Center. We will put links to these programs, Katie, in the bio, but to encourage everybody listening to check out Detect, PowerMom, Progress, and of course the NIH All of Us program, which Katie's involved in. Katie, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to walk us through what you're doing. Obviously, thank you for doing it. And as we like to say on this show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us via what you're doing. It's really a wonderful story.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.